Good morning, LBC Radio. My name is Corey Rosen, and you're listening to the Story Podcast. Today, I have a super awesome guest, but before we get into that, if you like this episode or if you find any part of this entertaining, please be sure to like, follow, subscribe. Check us out on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Apple Podcast. If you really want to help us grow, please be sure to rate us or leave a review. That is how we get boosted up in the ranking system, so that way other people can listen to our podcast and actually see us there in the rankings. With that said, I have on Mr. Ryan Geesaman today. Ryan Geesaman has been involved in media and technology since the 7th grade. While he spent a good amount of time on the stage in high school and college, his professional career has been mainly behind the scenes. He holds a degree in television/radio from Ithaca College and a master's degree in information systems from Penn State University. From 2004 to 2018, he serves as video production director at LCBC, a multisite church based in Manheim, PA. An award-winning film producer and editor, he now serves as chair of the Communication and Media Arts Department at Lancaster Bible College, Capital Seminary and Graduate School, directing the Media Arts program. When not behind a camera or in front of a computer, Ryan is a husband to Stacy, father to Ryker and Carter, avid film watcher, and enjoys smoking various meats. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Corey?
I'm doing awesome. So you said it all starts in 7th grade. What got you into it immediately? What hooked you apart? I guess it was theater that was the impetus.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was always my mom is an organist and pianist. My dad was a vocalist, and so I was always around music and performing in some aspect, very much around the church, honestly, and so that became a big part of my life. I played trumpet in elementary school. I had taken some piano lessons, and I sang as well. And so through that sort of that musical outlet, I was also interested in theater. You know, I saw my first high school musical when I was in elementary school and thought, someday I'm going to be on that stage. And so did theater throughout high school as well. But in 7th grade, the thing that kind of kicked off my interest in media, and not even really 7th grade, it started before that. I had an interest in all things electrical or technology. So cameras were very interesting to me. So I went through a photography stage. My family never really owned a video camera growing up, but when I would come into contact with one, I would want to figure out how it worked and what you could do with it. And so with a borrowed video camera, even in, I don't know, so that was 7th, so probably 4th or 5th grade, I made a stop motion animation with construction paper of a roller coaster. So that's probably where it all started. But in 7th grade, we had a class project in geography where we had to take a country and do a mock newscast. And I knew that at the church that my family attended, they had all kinds of video equipment because we had been on television at one point in the history of the church. And it was all kind of just sitting there, not being used anymore. But there was a young guy in the church who I said, Mark, would you be willing to help me with this class project? So I think it was a Saturday, brought everybody in from my group, it was a group project, and they all came to the church, and Mark came and helped us set up, and we did a mock newscast on France.
Wow.
And I just loved, I loved all the parts of creating that and then doing the editing after the fact, which at that point was like one tape to another kind of editing, linear editing. And that from that point forward, I was like, I want to do this. And so I started to acquire some of my own equipment just to be able to play around with it. And my friends and I started making movies through high school, just stupid things that I don't want anybody to see anymore. And then I helped create one of the teachers at the high school to create our first TV studio at the high school, which ended up being the back of his classroom.
That's awesome. It's always really funny whenever, because we had the same kind of project as well growing up in high school. It was a Spanish project where we had to create a video using Spanish or whatever. And if you look on it somewhere on the depths of YouTube, you can find me doing the awful Spanish and throwing, we were kicking soccer balls around, and you could see me throwing soccer balls at my friends. Very funny. I hope no one ever sees it in their entire life.
Well, thankfully, YouTube didn't exist back when I was going through high school. So
Let's talk about that. You talked about cutting tape and then pasting it, or what? How would you put it back together? That's my question.
well, so video editing was different than film editing. Film
Mhm.
editing, which I've done in my undergraduate, is literally cutting the film and then taping it back together. Linear video editing is two tape decks, and you would play back one, record it on the other, and that's how you would edit your pieces. So you would have multiple tapes or just different scenes that were recorded on the raw footage, and then you had an edit controller that would control the two decks, line them up, and kind of record on one while the other one plays back. And it was called linear because you had to do it linearly, right? If 5 minutes into the edit you decided you wanted to change the length of the first shot, you got to start all over again.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So from there, technology has changed a smidge.
A smidge.
A smidge.
Yeah.
What was it like from your seventh grade, and then I guess you decided you wanted to do this for a living?
Mm-hmm.
What was it like from the time you went from seventh grade into your college career? What was the change like from there?
Yeah. I mean, even looking at colleges, I really only looked at two schools. I looked at Kutztown University, which is a state school here in Pennsylvania, and I looked at Ithaca College in New York. And the difference was mind-blowing between the two, and it really wasn't a choice for me. I ended up, I think, applying to both, but Kutztown really just as a backup plan.
Mm-hmm.
Ithaca was far above Kutztown in terms of the technology that they had there. And so I knew that that's what I wanted to be exposed to. I didn't want to be exposed to old technology going into a technological field.
Right.
But even saying that, there was one room at Ithaca that had non-linear editing, so computer-based editing, because this was pretty brand new. I mean, it had been around, but it was way too expensive for anybody to really have. But it was just coming to that point. This was 1997, early 2000s. And so by my senior year, I actually had the ability to do nonlinear editing on my massive desktop computer in my dorm room.
How long would that take to render out?
Well, I do remember that the first editing system that I set up had maybe it was like a 9 gig hard drive. It was a SCSI drive, which was the fastest thing around at the time. And that hard drive, while I was editing, would get so hot that it would stop working. So I actually had to open up my computer, hang I think I used paper clips, hanging a fan that was just blowing on the bottom of the hard drive to keep it cool. So, there was some learning curve there.
It always blows my mind whenever I see like the technology from like Star Wars or like the original Star Wars, or for Jurassic Park, or all these monster machines that take years to like render.
Yeah.
Comparatively, whereas today you could literally click a button and have it render in like 30 minutes.
Yeah, although I mean, even today, the difference between my Mac laptop that's probably, I don't know, 5 years old at this point, and a desktop computer here at the college, I had a project just last week that I was working on, and I started it before I went to bed at home, and it was going to take hours. And when I woke up the next morning, the computer had crashed, so I had absolutely nothing. So I brought my hard drive in here to the school, plugged it in, and the thing rendered in 5 minutes. So it really just depends on the hardware that you're working with.
So over your college career, what was do you think one of the most eye-opening experiences, or one of the most, this is something I can take forward? Or had that already happened for you, do you think?
What was interesting when I went to college was I had spent so much time in high school already learning the craft. And I had been doing wedding videos. I had been doing a lot of editing. Um, there were times in college where I felt like I think I might know more about this particular
Wow.
topic than my professor. Now, that was not true for everything, but there were times like that. And so my probably junior and senior year, I ended up being a teacher's assistant for some of the courses, the intro courses and things like that. And so that was probably my first taste of teaching, which comes around a little later in my story. But I had that opportunity to start to teach others some of the things that I already knew how to do.
What was that like teaching your peers?
Well, they weren't necessarily my peers because I was a junior or senior at that point. They were
Gotcha.
freshmen. But it is funny because I have run into some of those folks then years later, and that's been a fun opportunity. I actually live just down the street from the sister of one of those students now.
That's awesome. So after college, what's your path? What do you want to do? What are you doing from there? Do you immediately go into your master's or?
Well, in college, my junior year, I did an internship with a company in LA. So our Ithaca had a program. It was kind of like study abroad, except the abroad was abroad the country, it was the other side of the country. And so the way that was set up is the main portion of that semester was a pretty intense internship. So you were on your own to find that though. So
Mm.
first week we were out there, it was figure out where you're going to intern. And so I interned for a little production company called Unipix Productions, but they were doing shows for Discovery Channel, the Learning Channel, things like that.
That's cool.
Um, and then we would take some classes out there as well. So I really enjoyed that experience, probably more than I thought I would. I grew up in this area, Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania. I wasn't thinking I was going to be interested in living in a city like
Like one of
Los
the biggest
Angeles.
cities in the U.S.
Right. But I did end up enjoying it. One of the things about LA that was so funny that I learned very quickly was you try to avoid the freeways as much as possible. So the first day I drive to my internship, it probably took me an hour and a half to get there because I took the freeway. And that day, somebody was like, yeah, you don't want to do that. Go through the city. So then I started driving all of these like random roads through the city, and I could get there in 45 minutes.
Wow. That's, that's something I've learned driving through like New York. It's like you avoid the beltways or the threeways
Yeah,
as,
yeah.
as much as possible. It's gonna take. It might be more frustrating, but it'll take a short amount of time to go through the city.
Yeah. So I had a lot of great experiences while I was in LA. I got to do a voiceover session with Danny Bonaducci, whose name may not sound familiar, but if you were older, it would, because he was one of the Partridge Family
Yeah.
children. Yeah.
So yeah. I remember the name vaguely.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
he was the little redhead boy in the Partridge Family. But one day, this is a funny story. One day they came around the office. They were looking for somebody to do a new voiceover for a show. They had produced the show originally for, I think, Discovery or the Learning Channel, and it had like a very British kind of low key voiceover, like very intelligent sounding. Um,
David Attenborough.
yeah, it was something like that, right? It was in like a nature kind of documentary style, and so very proper English voiceover. But ABC was picking up the show, and they wanted a little more excitement in it. And
Mhm.
so I had been listening. Danny Bonaducci at the time had a morning show on the radio, and I had heard him on my drive to work that morning. I was like, "What about Danny Bonaducci?" And they're like, "That's a great idea. He'll do anything for money." So sure enough, they sign on Danny Bonaducci, so they let me come to the voiceover session with Danny, and he ended up calling my mom and saying hi to
That's
her.
awesome. That's fun.
But at the end of all of that, they essentially told me, "Hey, when you graduate, come back out here. You'll have a job here," which is great. And so I'm thinking now, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to move to LA. I've got this job with Unipix. My senior year, they went out of business. So kind of changed plans for me.
A little bit.
But that's kind of how things roll out there in this industry. You have a job, it lasts for as long as the show lasts or as long as the company lasts, and then you go on unemployment and then you find another job. And that was a little bit of a wake up call before I even got there to say, do you want to live this lifestyle of job to job to job? And I decided no, that probably wasn't. My mom was a kindergarten teacher for 35 years. My dad worked at the same company for his entire career. And so I just, that lack of stability just wasn't attractive to me. So I ended up staying here in Pennsylvania. And I started working in computer programming for Penn State College of Medicine. And because I was working for Penn State, I could go to school there for a very reduced rate. So I always tell people, listen, if you can get somebody else to pay for your education,
Do it.
So
You're winning.
Exactly. So I was able to finish my master's degree in about 2.5 years.
Oh, wow. Short, isn't it?
It doesn't. A master's degree isn't as many credits as an undergraduate degree, so you can get it done pretty quickly.
Okay.
So I got that done. I was working full time. I was taking classes at night, but I didn't have a family. I was single. I had time for it at that point.
So what was how did that differ as opposed to the Ithaca education?
Well, so I went to Penn State Harrisburg campus, and I would say it's a different experience going to a master's program because it is a lot of working adults who are taking classes. So it's just a different environment. I really enjoyed my master's program and actually thought it was fairly easy to get done. And I was telling you earlier, I'm now working on a PhD. That is not easy.
Right, yeah.
So definitely a different experience. There's a lot of community built around traditional undergraduate education. So you really get to know your peers in traditional undergraduate. That's not necessarily the way it's going to be in graduate, especially in the master's program. I would end up in classes with different people every time. The PhD world, there is a little bit more community. You kind of have to lean on your peers for encouragement and am I actually going to make it?
Right.
So you have a cohort there that you're kind of working through things with. So there's a little bit more of that community coming back in the PhD program for me.
So what'd you do after your master's?
Let's see. As I was finishing my master's, so I was working at Penn State College of Medicine, so that's in Hershey. For my first year, I was commuting from my parents' house. I grew up in Bethel, Pennsylvania. So intersection of 501 and 78. I used to joke that the only reason it was on the map is because there was a gas station there. But that was probably a 45-minute drive or so for me each day. So eventually I decided I was going to move closer to work. And so I moved to the E-Town area. And when I did that, the apartment was right down the street from Hershey Evangelical Free Church. That's where I thought I was going to attend church while I was there. But a friend of mine from college had moved into the Lebanon area at that point. And she said, "Oh, you got to check out the church that we've been going to, this place called Lancaster County Bible Church." And I said, all right, I'll come like the first weekend after I move, and then I'll start going to Hershey Free
Right,
like I'm
yeah.
planning to. Well, I went to what is now known as LCBC, and I was like, okay, this is where I'm going. And they were just starting to get into video production. They had a sort of a part-time video producer there to create some fun videos, but they were moving into live video, so IMAG, image magnification, because they were building a new auditorium. So I started volunteering with all of that while I was there. And before I finished my master's, actually the last semester with Penn State, I was offered a full-time job at the church working in both video and web design. So it was kind of taking my background in video from my undergraduate degree, my web acumen from my job at Penn State College of Medicine, and kind of pulling those two things together.
So what was it like to switch from, because previously you've all done for film. How did that change when you went to church? Or was it
Well,
similar?
so actually, my background wasn't film because back when I went to school, film and video
That's right.
were two very different things, right? Because when I started, we were still doing linear editing on tape decks for video. Film was literally
The actual
cutting.
film.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they were very different things at that point. It's only been in the last couple of decades here that there's been that crossover between film and video, and essentially now all of the equipment is the same. So going to the church for me, it actually was very comfortable because I was very familiar with studio cameras and studio lighting, and had done field production with cameras and audio out in the field. So it was very comfortable making that move. I was probably a, not a great web designer, definitely front end design, not my thing. I was more of a programmer, back end. I could make it all work in the background. That was
It'd be functional, but not pretty.
exactly, yeah. That's what we have graphic designers for. You make it pretty, I'll make it work.
So, and that was at the very beginning of their production at LCBC.
Yeah, it was at that point. I want to say when I started attending there, because I didn't start working there right away. But when I
Right.
started attending there, I want to say there were about 2,500 people that would come on a weekend across. I think they had something crazy like 5 gatherings on a weekend
Oh, wow.
between Saturday and Sunday, just to get all the people through because it was a small auditorium. Now then, like I said, they were building a new auditorium, which now holds 2,100 people at a time. So then once they moved into that, there were fewer services each weekend.
So, what was it like to come in at the budding almost of their video production and then overseeing it grow exponentially?
Well, it was great for me because I wouldn't have been ready for what it is today. As the ministry grew, I was growing both in my skills and my ability to lead a team. So when I first started, it was just myself and one other guy so I was kind of doing that field production side of video, and he was doing the live, like weekend type video work. And it was just the two of us making the videos with a team of volunteers because I had been a volunteer there before I started full time, so there were others like me who were volunteering. So we did some fun stuff. It was acceptable. But then as we grew, I was able to hire additional folks for the team, and it has always, I mean, I've heard this said before, but it's always been my thing as well that I will always hire people who are better than me because I want the organization to succeed, right? I don't need to be the best at everything. If there's anything that I need to be the best at, it's picking the right team.
Absolutely. Delegation is your friend.
Right. So I learned very early on not to say no for people because there were people who I thought, oh, well, they're never going to leave that job to come work at the church with me.
Right.
So there was a young guy, actually same age as me, who was a volunteer, and I had this position, and he expressed interest. I was like, but you work at a production company in Harrisburg. He said, yeah, but I sit in front of an editing computer for 8 hours every day churning out videos, and I don't get to spend the time that I want to on them. I get to spend the amount of time that
It's
the
allotted.
budget Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So he's like, I am just an editing machine right now. I would like to come do something more creative. And so so through relationships like that, we were able to build a great team. When I left in 2018, there were 6 people on the video production team at the church.
So, At that time, were you guys doing like the live baptism stuff with all that crazy magic going on?
I can't remember now when exactly that started, but I mean, I think we had probably been doing it for at least half the time that I had been there. So it was 7 years. It's probably been going on now for 10 to 12 years.
Were you one of the people to set that stuff up, or?
Yeah, I don't remember how that idea was born necessarily. Um, I think one time they were just, what if we could take footage from the baptisms that just happened and incorporate it into a song
It's happening right
that's
now.
happening right afterwards? And we said, yeah, we could probably do that.
And for this, there's also a YouTube video about how it's done on LBC channel, the LCBC channel.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head where that exists.
It's insane what they do. So, like you said, they have the baptism live, or and they record it live, and then seconds, they maybe have like a minute to spare, and there's a song going on in the actual worship service, and then they relay that footage, edit it all with the name and everything, and put it up on the screen as the song is happening. It within like minutes to spare, or like seconds to spare rather.
Yeah, although I mean they do this in sports all the time, right?
That's fair, but also for a church though to do that.
Yeah, so we're just kind of doing an instant replay kind of a deal there.
That's so cool. What are some of the worries that you have to worry about when that happens? How do you manage stress? How do you deal with the you know office politics, shall we say?
You mean in that type of job or
In that type of job,
uh,
in that type of position?
yeah. So I will say that LCBC was a great place to work,
Good.
and I didn't leave because I was unhappy with anything there. It was a great environment, great leadership, and I think because it was one of my early jobs, it would have been easy to take that for granted. Like
Mm.
everybody has a workplace like this, but I recognize that that's not true. So there wasn't a lot of workplace politics. There were disagreements, but part of the fact that it was a great place to work was that we had the value of keeping short accounts with people. So if you're upset with
Mm.
somebody, you go talk to them about it. Have the right conversation with the right person at the right time, which means, you know, you're not talking about somebody, you're talking to them.
No
And
triangling.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that there were a lot of office politics or, you know, if there were toxic relationships in terms of, two people that just were butting heads constantly, that was going to be addressed one way or the other. So it was either going to get better because they worked things out, or it was going to get better because somebody was going to be removed from the situation. So it's not a perfect place with perfect people, but the values there are evident in the environment, the workplace environment. So that was all good. I mean, certainly stress, especially surrounding large holidays,
Mm.
Easter, Christmas. We would amp up our game considerably, and it would be long hours and big projects. But all of that is stretching as an artist. So yes, they were stressful, but I think that's some of the times that I grew the most.
That's awesome. So after LCBC, what did you do next?
After LCBC, I guess I came here. So
Yeah.
um, the the story of kind of moving into academics, it actually, I mean, it partially is because of my job at LCBC. I had to train volunteers. What I found as a volunteer coordinator was people that came to me and said, "I do this for a living. I'm God's gift to you. I'm gonna make everything better." Would never show up because it felt like too much work to them. They were already doing it. They didn't want to spend their free time doing the same thing that they did for work. So even though they felt like they had something to give, they didn't necessarily have the motivation to give that time or their skills. The people that came to me and said, "I have no idea what I'm doing, but this looks really cool," they would show up all the time. And so because of that, I decided, well, I want to pour into those people so that they can actually improve in this area, for their own purposes, but also so that they can
Oh,
be, yeah, can be servants here, in whatever way they want to be. So we implemented a monthly training night for video production, which was affectionately known as Video 101. And I, again, discovered that love of teaching others things that I knew how to do. And so after a few years of doing that at LCBC, I knew the provost here at Lancaster Bible College. I said, hey, if you ever have need for somebody to teach some video courses, I'd be interested in talking. Well, I think within a week I was having lunch with the chair of the music department at the time, because the live production program was living in that department. And I think probably within a semester I was teaching. So I did that for many years. It was probably 5 years or so that I had been an adjunct. And it was around the time that my dad passed away that I had a minor midlife crisis.
mm,
Maybe not a midlife crisis, but it causes you to reflect. And he was 69 when he passed away, and I was 36. And I did the math and said,
hmm.
I might be more than halfway done. Of course, none of us know how
Right.
much time we have, but it just put a finer point on that for me. So it made me think, am I doing the most that I can with what God has given me? And I certainly knew that my work at the church was impacting lives, but I saw my work at the college as a way to multiply that by however many students I come into contact with, because they will go on and do other things with other people and have influence. And so I came back to the college and said, hey, if you ever have a full-time opportunity that would make sense for me, let me know. And again, within, I think, a week, I was having lunch with the executive vice president and the provost, and they were saying, hey, not now, but maybe in a few years, this is kind of what we see coming. And it was probably exactly 3 years later that we had lunch again and started the process of making the transition.
So what was that like? This is very new for LBC to go into the filming, the live production, to really full force go into it. What was it like building the program? What was it like to expand what was already given?
Yeah, so there was already a program here. It had bounced around quite a bit between the music department and the arts and sciences department. It kind of bounced back and forth a couple of times. And as an adjunct, I just kept seeing the three letters on the front of my on the front of my classes switch between pro and com and back again. I don't know what's happening, but now it makes a whole lot more sense to me. It just didn't have somebody specifically paying attention to it. It was a program that was here that was it was usually being run by somebody who was running something else as well. And so by coming in and being the sole director of that program, it gave it some focus that had been lacking. So I think immediately the students really sensed that, oh, like this is more important now, or at least somebody's making sure that this is going well. So that was nice to see that there was almost a sense of relief from some of the students. And I just started looking at the curriculum and, what makes sense, what doesn't, what do we need to add, what do we need to take away. And so slowly been making those changes over the course of the, I guess, 4 years that I've been here.
How do you decide as the director? What do you have to look to the future of what church videography or cinematography might be, or are you looking to send people out to work in the film industry as the entity itself as opposed to church?
Yeah, I think part of what I wanted to make sure we were doing was preparing students for whatever they wanted to do. So initially, it did very much feel like we had a program that was preparing them to be a production tech at a church. But not all of them necessarily wanted to do that. And so one thing that we did was added specializations so that instead of kind of giving them just a broad overview of everything, if they decided, hey, I really want to focus on stage management, they could go that direction. If they really wanted to focus on live audio, they could take more courses in that direction and focus on that. And most recently, we've added now filmmaking and audio or music recording as specializations because I was sensing that those were areas that people were very interested in. So, I mean, as far as what it's like, I'm listening to incoming students, prospective students saying, "Do you have this? Do you have a program in this?" Because that's if we don't have something to service those students, then I'm interested in filling that gap. And on the other side, as our program continues to grow, there are going to be areas that naturally will atrophy because there is an interest in those, and then those need to go away. You know, we're here to educate Christian students. And so if they're not interested in the program, we can't educate them in that area. If they are interested, then we should have something to fill that gap for them. So that's really how I determine which direction we need to go. And then within that, I look for somebody who knows that area. So for instance, with the film area, yes, I've done that. I mean, during my time at LCBC, again, that those two areas of video and film really started to blur. And so we became filmmakers. Even though we didn't necessarily study filmmaking, the general techniques were the same between video and film, and now all of the language was becoming the same. You know, we didn't really talk about f-stops and aperture in TV. We just said, is it exposed properly?
Right.
But now, you know, we're talking about depth of field and things like that are more filmmaking tools and terms. And so when I was developing the film making specialization, I pulled together a group of experts and said, so, you know, what do our students need out of this program? Here are the courses that we already have. What do we need to add to make this legitimate for them and give them the tools that they need?
So speaking about teaching Christians how to, be in the film, how do you acknowledge that the film industry is a part of a fallen world, and how do Christians interact with that?
Well, I don't think it's any different than any other field. How do you be a Christian physical therapist in a fallen world? I think we get a little wrapped up in the arts because,
More prominent.
yeah, I mean, I guess we are storytelling animals
Yeah.
as humans. Like we love to tell stories. We love to hear stories. There's I think there's a reason that Jesus communicated through stories all the time because he knew it was a powerful tool for communication. And because it's a powerful tool, I think we get wrapped up in, well, you know, Hollywood is dark. So, I mean, what we try to communicate to our students and prepare them for is, you know, yeah, if you're going to go into this industry and not necessarily look for a Christian route or a ministry to work with or a church, yeah, you're going to run into these things, and you're going to have to decide sometimes, am I going to take this job on this film? What is that going to expose me to? What is that going to put on my resume? Do I want that there? So there are some choices, some hard choices that will need to be made. Even as somebody who does, you know, I am a full-time educator now and a part-time filmmaker. Even as a part-time filmmaker, there have been opportunities that have basically been dropped into my lap, which I've said no to because I don't think I can get behind this project. So those are some of the things that we're preparing them for. But I have no problem putting light in a dark world, right? So I don't want all of Hollywood to be
Non-Christian.
yeah, people that don't have faith. I certainly want to put people of faith in those positions, helping to steer that industry.
There has been such a taboo of saying, "Oh, you work in this field. That field is so sinful," or "Oh, you're a Christian. You play at a bar, or you go to a bar. How dare you?" Um, it's As a Christian, you need to separate the place because it's your ministry is people, no matter what. The
Mm-hmm.
ministry is people, community, unity in Christ. Um, and it can't happen unless there is a people of faith going into these spaces, filling these spaces with their light. And that doesn't mean going up and evangelizing every single person you ever see. It's just going there being a good person, going there being a help to somebody who's going through a really rough time. Because let's be honest, they wouldn't be there if they weren't having a really rough time of things.
Right, right.
So don't be afraid to go out into the world and into a very dark place because it's dark everywhere for the most part, and being that light to somebody who desperately needs it.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean converting them completely or that be your mission. Just be a friend.
Yeah, and even the content that we're producing as Christian
Yeah.
filmmakers, we were just working on a project that was a faith-based film that shot a few weeks ago, and I mean I don't know that everybody on that set was a believer. I don't know that they had faith, but they were interacting with the content of this film, and hopefully seeing Christ through some of us that were professing Christians on that set. And we were not in the our job on that set was not to convert people. Our job on that set was to make a film.
movie.
Yeah, exactly. But hopefully we were being good witnesses during that.
And even to that point, everybody at PureFlix probably isn't a Christian either. It's a job to them.
Mm-hmm.
There's never going to be a perfect environment, a perfect Christian environment. Even church hurt is a real thing. People, even though they are Christians, aren't the best Christians.
Mm.
So you're gonna have to deal with all sorts of levels of uncomfort or faith or challenges to your faith. To go into a workplace expecting the perfect faith based workplace isn't gonna happen.
Right.
So let's talk about your part-time filmmaking, what that has included, all the fun stories with that, because you are an award-winning filmmaker.
Yeah, so that all started, I mean, like I said, we were really starting to make short films at the church that as technology kind of crossed over and we were doing more storytelling, we were basically becoming filmmakers at the church, and those guys still are. I still keep in touch with the LCBC crew. But we had a volunteer actor named Brad Hawkins. So I had directed Brad on a couple of different projects there at the church. And I noticed that he was creating a short film with his daughter called Roller Coaster.
Sure.
Yeah. And they had a screening in Lancaster. I was like, I'll go to that. And so I think maybe Brian and so Brian was the gentleman I talked about who I hired from the production company at LCBC. I think both he and I went to the screening, and afterwards it was like, that was pretty good. So I talked to Brad afterwards. I said, hey, I really enjoyed that. Hey, if you ever do another project, like I'd be interested in being involved somehow. And he was like, immediately, he was like, I was hoping you'd ask. So I mean, I very quickly, I think we started talking about the next idea that he had for a film called Filling In, and Brian ended up being the director of photography. I was the audio recordist and editor on that, visual effects as well, and so produced that one. I think we did that in 3 days, 3 or 4 shooting days, which should have been 5 or 6 shooting days. we learned pretty quickly on that set how to manage a calendar, and that you can't base the calendar off of somebody's availability. If they're not available and the calendar needs to have more dates on it, then they're not the right person for the job. Because we ran people ragged on that shoot. But that was a fun project. I mean, I'd never edited a narrative that long. I mean, that one came out to be, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. But fun project. Jared Odrick, who was a professional football player at the time, was one of the main characters. So it was fun to kind of have this massive guy acting like the Tooth Fairy in that.
That's right. That's right. That was the one.
Yeah.
What a fun idea that was.
So then a couple of years later, we went and he developed a script for a short film called Calf Rope. And I mean, personally, I love that film and that story. Filling in was fun. Calf Rope was meaningful. So that one, I really enjoyed working on that. So on that set, I was the first AD, so first assistant director, which actually that's a role that fits me well. I wouldn't have necessarily known that going into filling in, but my skill set lends itself toward that role of first AD. Had a great experience on that. I think we had a 6-day schedule for Calf Rope, it was very realistic. We were getting people home on time. So that's one of the things that's most meaningful from that entire process is after the fact, the people that were involved in the project thanked me for getting them home on time. And that's part of my job as first AD. So that was very fulfilling to say, oh yeah, well, we were successful. We did what we set out to do, and we did it in the time that we set out to do it. So that one, the editing process was a little bit different on that one. Things were crazy for me. I mean, this was, we released Calf Rope basically in the spring of 2020, which if you remember anything about the spring of 2020.
Exactly when everything happened.
Yeah. So things were a little crazy during that time. And so the editing process, Brad actually kind of did a rough cut just on his own as the director to say he did the director's cut, and we would work off the director's cut. And so I would basically repeat everything that he did, and then we would from that polish, trim, make things better. And great little movie. Won tons of awards, even more than filling in. And yeah, I'm really proud of that one.
So, what is it like to balance that? Is it just watching the clock all the time? Is it saying, "Hey, we can't take another take of this"? Is it stuff like that, or?
Yeah, so I'm basically whispering in the director's ear the whole time, saying, well, and really everybody, making sure, hey, we have scheduled however many hours it is. It's 3 hours for this. 1 hour is our setup. We're supposed to be shooting for an hour and a half, and then we've got a half hour to tear everything down. And so it's watching that clock and saying, listen, it's time to start shooting. How close are we? And just kind of putting that pressure on people because, creatives, they'll keep tweaking things forever if you let them to make it better. But at some point, it has to be good enough to get going or we don't have anything. So it's putting that pressure on. It's bugging the director and saying, hey, we really need to move on. Or what Brad likes about me is that I won't tell him no. I will say, listen, you can do that another 3 times, but what are you letting go of later?
Yeah.
So it's just basically putting those options in front of the director and saying, what do you want to do? What's the most important thing to you right now?
So, well, we can talk about the new production later, I guess.
Okay.
What is it circling back to how you manage your teaching and getting people home on time? How is that for you? How do you manage your work life and your family life? And because it can be very different things.
Yeah.
Conflicting things.
It's my wife reminding me occasionally that I can't do everything.
It's your wife being the AD for your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I if I'm going to sign on for anything, I will run it past her to get her advice first, because I never want to leave I don't want to put my family on the back burner. Now my kids are older now, so they have their own little lives as teenagers. So it in some ways it feels like they need us less, except they need us to drive them everywhere. All the time. So I mean, I don't know that I have any magic formula for how to balance all of that. I just try to keep a pulse on everything. And I heard this description one time that we're all juggling, right? And some of the balls that we're juggling are rubber balls, and some of the balls that we're juggling are glass. And so you can occasionally drop something, but you better hope it's one of the rubber balls.
Right, yeah.
And so, and I think that in life, some things change from rubber to glass.
Or from glass to rubber.
Exactly. And so it's a matter of, we're always juggling. For me, it's juggling a full-time job. It's juggling filmmaking. It's juggling freelance work that I do or consulting work that I do. It's my family. It's my studies. And at times, some of those things are going to get dropped. But I don't really ever want my family to be the thing that drops. So.
Do your kids ever get a kick out of, oh, my dad's a filmmaker?
Well, they get a kick out of being in them. Usually they usually get called in to do something. Now, well, we'll talk. You said we'll talk about the other one. So this weekend, my youngest is going to be in a little pickup scene for the current film, but both of them were in calf rope. My oldest was the newspaper delivery boy, and my youngest was in the Cub Scout scene. I don't think either of them were in filling in. Most of that was shot in Rochester, New York, so they weren't around.
Can we talk about Night Voices? Or
yeah, sure.
Let's talk about Night Voices. You probably know it better than I do.
Well, so Night Voices is the short film that we just shot. This was again written by Brad, and it was co-written by Peter Fenton, who ended up being producer on the project as well. And I should probably know the log line for it, but how I describe it is a sort of a rundown DJ kind of talk show host is saved by an unexpected interaction with his nephew.
And you guys right, and so that took, what was it, a weekend?
We shot that over 4 days, essentially 4 nights, 4 afternoons into evenings, into mornings, over Labor Day weekend. So we started Thursday afternoon of Labor Day weekend, and we finished early Monday morning.
When do you think that can be expected to be pushed out, do you think?
I think the post-production, I'm not editing this one. I've passed off that job to somebody else. I'll be doing the visual effects. So I was first AD on the project, and I'll be visual effects as well. And I was co-producer and continue to co-produce that project. I believe the schedule is hope to have post-production done by the end of the year.
And so be sure to check out Dadley Productions. Shout out to them for their Night Voices, and check out all their other great stuff on there as well.
Yeah, and this is another great story.
Absolutely
meaningful and I think unexpected and
dark Pixar.
The most it's the most explicitly faith-based film that Dadley Productions has done. But it is not squeaky clean or I don't know how to necessarily describe it.
Like a dark Pixar.
Yeah.
Dark Pixar. That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
Tear-jerking feelings, but not afraid to get down and dirty.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I have some general questions to ask you as we're ending off our time here. You have had an experience with Jay Leno.
Oh yeah.
I heard.
Well, so back backing up to my internship in LA. Where we lived was right on the outskirts of Burbank. And one evening I was coming home from my internship and I got into the hallway. I think I was checking the mail and I looked down the hallway and there was a huge crowd outside of our apartment door. And my first thought was that one of my roommates had died or something. So I started walking down the hall. Nobody seemed too like worked up about anything. So I was like, all right, don't really understand what's happening here. So I start walking towards the door. And as I walk towards the door, Jay Leno walks out of my apartment into the hallway. And I was like, hi. He said,
Hi.
Oh, hi, I'm Jay Leno. I said, I know.
I'm aware.
He said, we're doing a little shoot here. Do you have any talent? Like, are you in show business or anything? I said, well, I intern at a production company. He's like, no. Do you like have any sort of talent? I said, well, I can play the guitar. He said, oh, well, let's go to your apartment. I was like, you're in my apartment. So they turn around, we walk back into the apartment, and now I see the camera crew and the light in the apartment. They're messing around with my roommate, who is standing next to Howie Mandel.
Oh my gosh.
So the shtick was that they were looking for a new opening act for Howie Mandel's comedy show, and so I guess I auditioned for Howie Mandel's opening act in my apartment kitchen, playing Kumbaya on the guitar with a vegetable strainer on my head. Again, these were the days before YouTube, so I'm not sure anybody can find that clip.
What resulted out of that? What was the conversation after where you said when you and your roommate were alone? What was the conversation that happened at that point?
Well, it's just you have no idea what's going to happen after that because they're not going to call you and let you know whether you're going to be on or not.
Right.
And so it's just I think we expected it to be on one night, but it ended up being on earlier. And the only reason I knew to record it was we're on the West Coast, so we're behind.
Mm-hmm.
My mom actually saw like the preview before the nightly news or something like that, and she said, I just saw you on the preview for the Tonight Show. So then I knew to record it. And that's how I have, I think, the only existing copy of that.
That's awesome. Was it all it was hyped up to be to meet Jay Leno and Howie Mandel, or was it just
it was
regular people?
It was fun. I actually understood the interaction more years later because I felt like Howie Mandel was acting kind of weird. Well, Jay Leno had, like, he was hoarse. Like, he was, like, maybe feeling a little under the weather. Well, if you know anything about Howie Mandel now, he's a germaphobe.
Yes.
So I think he was a little standoffish because he was all worked up about Jay Leno having a cold or something like that.
Oh, my goodness. So you didn't even get a chance to shake Howie's hand or anything, I guess.
Gosh, I couldn't tell you for sure. But I don't remember him being weird that way with me. But I don't know that I tried to shake anybody's hand. I don't know.
What a random situation to walk into.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
Jay Leno walking in. Hey, I'm Jay Leno.
Yeah, I'm aware.
What are you doing here? What's going on? That's so funny. So, back to the actual general questions that I have for you.
Yeah.
I can ask everybody. When did you meet Jay Leno? What is worship to you?
Oh, wow. Well, that's an interesting question as somebody who's on the technical side of worship because a lot of worship times we are behind a screen in a different room,
Doing
behind a
everything
camera.
You're not supposed to do.
Yeah. And so you have to find a way to still worship through that. And so I definitely subscribe to the idea that I think is scriptural that everything we do can be worship if it's done with the right attitude and the right heart behind it. So I've even had conversations with people in our church when they've complained about a camera operator moving around on stage during worship. and I have to go back to them and say, well, you have to understand, you you don't have any trouble with a guitarist up there walking around with their guitar playing. That is that person's instrument. So when they're moving around with that camera, they are serving and worshiping through that act. And so I don't think worship is singing. I don't think it's the worship service in and of itself. I think worship is anything that we do to glorify God.
And if anything, during that time, it shouldn't matter what's going on stage anyway, because it's not a show.
Right.
It's your time with God. You're being led through a song, yeah, but it's not a concert.
Right.
You shouldn't, anything that happens on stage, granted, if it's significant enough, maybe you should pay attention to it.
Well, there was that one time that our pastor passed out, but whatever.
Yeah, whatever. That's fine. Jeez, that must have been scary.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably one of the worst things that's ever happened, or one of the funniest, maybe.
It was not funny. No.
Right. Well, but you can look back on it now and be like, that was kind of funny, but also in the moment.
Yeah, definitely scary.
All good?
All good.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
he had just had like a stomach bug, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I think I'll be fine." He wasn't fine.
Hey, listen, if you ever, well, first rule, never lock your knees. I've seen so many people do that, and they're gone. But if you're not feeling up to snuff, don't force yourself out into a crowd. Just safe than sorry, always.
Yeah.
What are some of the mistakes that you've seen students make or you yourself have made, and how can we curb that for future generations?
Oh man, I think I'll just stick to myself. One of the first wedding videos that I produced on my own, I learned the difference between heavy duty batteries and alkaline batteries, because I stuck they were cheaper, so I stuck the heavy duty batteries in my wireless microphones, and they died 5 minutes into the wedding ceremony. Because heavy duty batteries die, like they I guess the full current or the full voltage dies off pretty quickly, and then they kind of trickle out, whereas alkalines are more consistent. Okay. And so for electronic equipment, you need alkaline batteries. So I learned that pretty quickly.
Very good tip.
Yeah.
Make sure you learn. What's one of the most memorable pieces of advice anyone has ever given you?
Wait, I'm not done
you're
telling.
Done?
Yeah. Oh my goodness,
Okay,
I have so many mistakes that I made. I think the closest that I've ever gotten to being fired from a production job was I was working at a place called Channel 5 News in Reading. It was just a small local news program through the cable company, and the cable company decided to can the newscast, and they turned it into like a news magazine show instead. It required fewer people, so it was a cost-saving measure. Anyway, so we start into this news magazine show. They get all these political candidates to do a political thing one day, and while I was walking through the office area, one of the phones started ringing. Well, I knew that was the phone of one of the previous anchors, a buddy of mine from the newscast who wasn't there anymore. So I was like, well, I should probably answer that and tell them that he's no longer here. So I answer the phone. It's a political candidate saying that they're going to be 5 minutes late. And I said, well, we just finished shooting that segment. Oh, okay. I don't know how we messed that up. Okay. So I hang up. And minutes, I don't know, later, the producer's running around going, so-and-so didn't show up. I was like, huh. Well, I think I just got off the phone with them. But we already, he said, no, we have 2 segments. What? Like, it was probably like Democrats and Republicans. He's like, we've got 2 segments. So he basically told me that I was never allowed to answer a phone again. So don't answer phones that don't belong to you. Okay, what was your next question?
All right, so what was one of the most memorable, maybe that's it, most memorable pieces of advice that anyone's ever given you?
Advice. Don't answer phones that don't belong to you. No, apparently nothing. I don't, advice. So I guess this is memorable advice. I didn't take it, but it goes back to your question of how do you balance all of these aspects of life. That chair of the music department, he's no longer here, Dan Hollingsworth, he had given me advice that I should put my family, or even my wife, my kid, I should put my family on my calendar.
Mm.
And so I have not taken that advice. I don't literally put my family on my calendar, although I guess I kind of do, because I have all of my kids' things on the calendar now, like all of their football games and musical rehearsals and things like that. But his advice was you put things on your calendar that you don't want to miss. So put your family on your calendar so that you are setting aside time for them. So I have not literally done that, but I think I do it without doing it.
Well, absolutely. Well, because when I didn't keep a calendar, I would overbook or whatever. And some people will say the same thing about Bible. Make sure you schedule out your Bible time, right? Because you won't do it otherwise. Same kind of concept applies to family. It might seem cold, but us humans are wired to routine and to schedule. And if you don't have that on your routine or schedule, it's gonna go. You're not gonna think about it anymore.
Yep.
This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, good. I didn't think I was interesting enough for this.
No, I think you're very interesting enough. Considering all the things you've done in the Jay Leno story and the Howie Mandel story, and you're one of the better teachers that I've had here at LBC.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I definitely think you have a lot to say and a lot of wisdom to impart. And I think that has been given.
Awesome.
If you want to check out our story, be sure to look up The Story, Corey Rosen, that's CORYROSEN, on all streaming platforms. You can find us there. Make sure you like us on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you do your streaming. You can find us. Make sure you check us out there. This Sunday, we have Plunder and Lightning, a really fun band. Obviously, they're a metal band, Thunder and Lightning, but they make it Plunder and Lightning. They're a pirate band, so that's their whole shindig there. I'm really excited to talk to them coming up Sunday at 2 p.m. With all that said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks.
Bye.